Now, this video that I am about to do, which is doing the prediction of the MLS Eastern Conference, was not part of the plan in terms of me pre-recording these videos so that I can basically schedule these videos to be uploaded during times when I am not going to be at home. And that, for those of you that don't know, I am actually going to be going to Vegas this weekend for a business trip, and these pre-recorded videos are just act as filler gaps of the time that I am not here at home recording videos. But since I done the season preview a day earlier, I thought, you know what, we might as well just do the Eastern Conference prediction video because, I know today is supposed to be my packing day, but I don't really have a lot of things that I need to pack, and right now it's only like 8 o'clock in the evening, so after this video I'll probably start doing the packing, and that I should be done before 10 o'clock where I can just go to sleep, and then tomorrow around 7 a.m. that's when I leave. So yeah, that being said, let's us talk about the Eastern Conference and do the prediction video. I didn't even tell you guys that this is that time of the year again where it's time to do prediction for each of the conference, and that, as I said before many times, whenever I do prediction video and do ranking videos, if I put your team not in the playoffs, or if I put your team lower than what you thought that I was going to put you in the prediction below, don't take it personal. This is just my prediction, and this is just my opinion of how it will work out. And that my prediction, some of them are fairly good, but there's always a couple that are very bad. And it seems like every year there's also always that one team that I predict, whether it's from the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference, that I just get it completely wrong. So, the bottom line is, don't take this personal if I put your team not in the playoffs or lower than where you are. And if you disagree of what are some of the teams that I put, and if you feel like I put them a little bit too low, let me know in the comments below, because doing these prediction videos are probably the most controversial video that I'll do all year. Well, that is until a couple of days ago when I was doing this video talking about Ron Yan resigning as the head coach of FC Cincinnati, and I try to clear up some misunderstandings that people kind of took offended in the first video that I talked about. Ron Yan potentially is going to resign as the head coach of FC Cincinnati, and it seemed like a lot of people have now not only become more misunderstood, but the hateful comments are still there. And as I said yesterday in the news of the week, I'm not going to touch that topics anymore. In fact, I'm not even going to go in. I will still monitor the comments, and I'll still kind of read to make sure nobody really kind of put some insulting things in the comments, because if you put insulting thing in the comments, I not only will remove it from the comment section, but I will straight out ban you from my channel. So I'll just monitor in terms of the comments, and that, if you put some insulting thing, and that if I feel like it's something that shouldn't be belong in the comment section, I will definitely remove that, and I'm not going to hesitate in terms of doing that. But that being said, let's talk about the prediction, and we start off with last. And this team actually played in the CONCACAF Champions League yesterday, and probably got the best result out of all the team so far in CCL. Although, that being said, Seattle is now leading 2-0 against Olympia as we are speaking, and of course are keeping an eye on the match right now as I'm doing this video. And that, of course, is the Montreal Impact. So despite the fact that the Impact got an impressive 2-2 draw against Saprissa, where a lot of people didn't give the Impact a chance against Saprissa, and I know Impact fan, even though they're going to be happy with the result, they'll be a little bit disappointed that they, of course, conceded 2 goals to blow a 2-0 lead in this game. But, as much as I know Montreal, they had a good result against Saprissa, watching that game, that just kind of makes me feel like how Montreal is going to be this season, where this is going to be a team that I feel like it's going to be like last season, and especially in the first part of the season, where they just grind out goals and somehow able to score enough, and then for the rest of the game, they're just going to bunker. And we saw it in the game against Saprissa. It didn't quite work. Now, granted, they kind of ran out of gas after 70 minutes or so, because they're still only playing their first couple of games, and that was their first competitive games in months. But still, I just don't see if this is going to be the tactics that Thierry Henry is going to use for this team. It's not going to work, and it's not going to get you very far in this league, because you can't just hope to score a couple of goals or hope to nick a couple of goals and just bunker for the rest of the season. And we saw that happen last season, especially late, where when the goal well dries up and they're trying to bunker down, it didn't quite work for most of the time. So yeah, I put them at dead last right now, and that besides that, they also have a lot of problem in terms of, there's a lot of question in terms of the goal scoring, the midfield, and also the defensive end. And they didn't really add a lot of pieces in terms of trying to improve that. Although the pieces that they add, we still are going to be questioned whether or not if they're going to be effective. So yeah, that's why I am putting Montreal dead last. Now at number 12, and this team finished dead last season, and I moved them one spot up from this season, and predicting where are they going to finish, is FC Cincinnati. So despite the fact that these last couple of days has been a very turbulent last couple of days for FC Cincinnati, I still believe they're not going to finish dead last, and that, besides the whole Ron Yan situation and the whole racial slur investigation, which I'm going to say it again, I'm not going to talk about this issue anymore, and that you got to also keep in mind that this investigation is still ongoing right now, and people are just jumping it into conclusion way too much based on the numerous speculation that is going on. But, despite that, I still think they shouldn't be finished dead last, and that they definitely added some talent into this team and got rid of pretty much everybody that was in that starting 11. I mean, they made some wholesale changes and are kind of starting this first rebuild that they are now in MLS. And although this first rebuild that they are in is not going to get them pretty far, I don't think it's going to be as bad as last season. I mean, I think the defense maybe should be a little bit more stabler, and I also like the fact that they add some attacking piece like Jurgen Kadia, and also even getting Union top assist man Harris Medunian in there in the midfield. So they should have much better in terms of going forward on the attack. And in terms of defensive wise, there's still definitely question whether or not if this defense is decent enough. But I don't think this is going to be a defense that it's going to repeat last season where they're going to concede like 70 plus goals. And at number 11, and this team, a couple of weeks ago when I did the prevision of the prediction for the Eastern Conference, I had this team at dead last. But recently, for the last couple of weeks, I have started to bring this team higher in the standings, because they finally started to add players that they hope that can replace some of the guys that they lost in the offseason and also in the middle of last season. And they also started to make their roster look much more bulkier than it was a couple of weeks ago, where it was just paper thin, and that there was no way in the world that a couple of weeks ago that if the Fire was going to use that roster, that this team was going to even get anywhere throughout the season, and that they're just going to get a ticket straight down to the bottom of the Eastern Conference. But recently, they've done a good job in terms of adding some key pieces. They just got a DP slot fill just a couple of days ago, and today I believe they added another Serbian midfielder into this squad. So yeah, I think this team is definitely getting better. However, one of the reasons why I still put them very low is because, one, there is still a lot of question in terms of the defense in this team, and two, are they going to be consistent heading into this year? Because if they're going to be inconsistent just like last season, they're probably going to be finishing just around the same spot that they did last year. And three, we'll see if they're going to continue this trend of adding all these players, and also the players that they acquired this offseason. We don't know if they are going to be the same impacted player that the Fire has last season, and whether or not if those guys are either going to be just as good as the players that they lost this offseason, or even much better than the players that they lost this offseason and also in the middle of last season. At number 10, and this is going to surprise a couple of people, And I'm pretty sure this is going to drive Red Bulls fan absolutely nuts, the fact that I put them this low in the standings. But I just feel like, last season with Sporting KC, a lot of people was kind of surprised the fact that they dropped out of the playoffs spot, and that for the first time in 11 years they didn't make it to the playoffs, and they actually finished one of the worst position in their conference. Well, I feel like it's going to be the case this year for the Red Bulls, and it's not going to be because of the whole CCL situation, which kind of took a big toll on SKC, and also it's probably not going to be an injury issue, although that's to be determined whether or not if the Red Bulls are going to suffer some back-breaking injury. But it's just that I feel like this offseason, since they lost so many key players in this team, and that they lost not only some key players on this team, but they lose like some of these players that's been with this team for the past couple of years and have made some big impact to this team, that the fact that they didn't really replace any of them and just kind of rely once again on some of their academy player to step into the squad, I don't know whether or not if that's going to work out or not. I mean, some of these key pieces that I mentioned that they lost include Bradley Wright Phillips, Luis Robles to Inter Miami, Kamar Lawrence, Michael Murillo, and all these guys that was just key component to this team that's no longer there. And for the most part, most of these guys hasn't really been replaced. So, yeah, I just feel like, the Red Bulls, unless if they potentially make a big signing to replace some of those guys, or if there's going to be some academy players that have shown before that they can step into this Red Bulls team and do very well with this first team, I don't know if the Red Bulls are going to do very well this season, and that I feel like this is kind of almost like a transitional year for the Red Bulls, where they are turning the page in terms of getting rid of some of their old guards and now bringing some new talent into this team, and that there's going to be pain and struggle in terms of a team that goes through that transitional period. Now, at number 9, and this is the expansion team, Inter Miami. So usually with expansion teams, and you've seen this happen the last couple of times when I do prediction. In fact, I think this is the third year that I am doing prediction. You always see me putting expansion team right around the middle or near the bottom part of the table, and mainly because I put them there is I don't know exactly how they're going to do in their expansion year. Sure, we can maybe get a good idea with some of the signings that they've done in the off season, but still, you don't know if those signings will pay off, and that, expansion team, unless if your name is Atlanta and LAFC, most expansion team usually struggle and not make the playoffs in the first season. Now, that doesn't mean that Inter Miami might be a team that might miss the playoffs, and that I do like the fact that they have a mix of veteran player on this team, and also recently finally started to kind of mean business by getting Rodolfo Pizarro, and soon they might even get Boca Junior midfielder Augustin Amandra in this team. And let's also not forget that they also have one more DP slot to fill, which it's looking more and more likely they're going to fill it in the summer, and that most likely that's going to be that big name player that they've been promising for a while now that they're going to bring into the squad. But until then, I'm just going to put them in 9th place, and that, if they can have a season like LAFC or Atlanta, I think they could definitely make the playoffs and can prove me wrong in terms of them being in 9th place. But if they do not have that kind of season and have more like an FC Cincinnati or Minnesota season, this could really be a place where they find themselves, or they could even go a little bit lower in terms of the standings. Now, at number 8, and I kind of struggle with the 8th and 7th spot, because I think this is going to be a battle for these last spot in the playoffs, and I'm going to say the New England Revolution is going to be in 8th spot. And I might as well put the 7th spot too, because I'm going to talk about why I have struggled in terms of putting both of these teams where they are, is because, on one hand, I really want Orlando City to make the playoffs this year, and that when I look at the pieces that they added in the offseason, I just feel like it's enough for them to make it to the playoffs, and especially that I crowned them the off-season champion, and hopefully this time I don't jinx Orlando City by saying that they're the off-season champion like I did with a couple of years ago, that they did not finish very well in the standing. But I feel like this year is a little bit different, mainly because at least this year they decided to sign some young promising South American player into their team, and they also got Oscar Pereira, who knows how to get the best of youngsters and get a team that might be kind of mediocre to get themselves into the playoffs. Now, that being said, going to New England and where I put them in 8th place, the reason why I put them in 8th place and maybe they will not make it into the playoffs isn't due to the fact that they, some of the addition that they made this offseason I really like, and I think that should be a good improve. They're going to be much more improved going forward on the attack. My main concern is still their defensive mid and that defense that they have, because they didn't really do a lot this offseason in terms of addressing the defensive area, and they especially did not do anything in terms of addressing that central defensive mid area. That there's still a lot of question who is actually going to play in that role and who is going to really not make that role as the biggest weakness that the New England Revolution have. And because of that, I think and the other thing is that they drew a lot of games last season, and that they did also had a stretch where they kind of went 11 games without losing. I don't know if it's going to be happening again this season, and that some of those draws that they play, some of them could potentially turn to wins, which maybe get them to the playoffs, but some of them could easily also turns out to be losses, and that they could really find themselves not make it into the playoffs. Now, what will make New England go to the playoffs is that if the attack is going to be looking very decent, which I think it's going to be, because when you look at that attack, and I really like they added another DP going forward with Adam Buxaw, and also you have a very underrated creative player in Carlos Hill and Gustavo Bo, who he's going to be a 10+ goal scorer on your team. I think the attack will carry this team to the playoffs, despite the fact that they're kind of a little bit weak going forward at the back. And as for Orlando City, I talked about why they could potentially make the playoffs, and the thing that makes me worry about this Orlando City team, and probably why I think this season will be another season of disappointment and another year added to the longest active playoff drought right now in MLS, is they can't be consistent going they can't be consistent in terms of scoring goals. Scoring goals was a huge problem for this Orlando City team, and the problem isn't due to the fact that they didn't create chances, but it's because they didn't have any goals scored on this team that was clinical in front of goal. And when you look at the striker position that they have so far, it's pretty much the same as last season, with Tesha Akindele and Dom Dwyer as your main option, and both of those guys were kind of a little bit meh in terms of in front of goal, and really kind of the entire attack last season was just so inconsistent in terms of putting the ball into the back of the net. There's some games where they could be very decent, and then there are some games where they are not decent whatsoever. So the inconsistency of not able to find the back of the net might be another big reason why they might not make the playoffs, even with the added talent that they had. And maybe the second reason why they might not make the playoffs is because they have what they've been doing for the last couple of years, where they give their fans hope that this team can actually make the playoffs, only to have the second half of the season, and especially during the most crucial times where you need to win this game so that you can either be staying in a playoff race or actually compete for the playoffs to of course win those games. They're unable to win that. So yeah, it will be interesting to see, both of these teams. I think they could really be the two teams that fighting out for this last spot, and it will be interesting to see who, of course, will make it in and who, of course, will drop it out. Now, at number 6, I'm going to put the dark horse team, the Columbus Crew. Again, as I said last season, I really think this team is going to make the playoffs next season. knowing how good they have done in the second half of the season. And I especially feel like they definitely make the case of making the playoffs with some of their move that they made this off season. They add in a couple of more attacking force, and they of course got that big money signing by bringing Lucas Zellerian from Tigres. I think last season, especially in the second half of the season, getting some key guys back like Harrison Affo and potentially getting Milton Valenzuela back in this team, they should be much more solid in terms of their defense than they had last season. I mean, last season, losing those two fullbacks really hurt this team, and that I feel like going back to when I did the Columbus Crew MVP, I probably should have give the MVP to one of those fullbacks because they were just so important to this team, and once they went down, the rest of the team also went down. So yeah, I'm very impressed about what this Columbus team does. Although the reason why I didn't put them that high in the list is because they are a team that I still feel like they're not up to that talent level where I think they could compete in terms of the top 4 spot in the playoffs. I mean, they could prove me wrong in terms of actually doing that, and that this is why I kind of call them a dark horse team, because even though I'm putting them in 6th place right now, if they have these players that can perform and really kind of perform over their expectation, they can really rise themselves up in the top part of the table. But as of now, since they're the dark horse team in the Eastern Conference, and I usually put the dark horse team right when they're making the playoffs, but they're just kind of right there above that red line that they are, just for kind of safety. Whether if I sometimes call these dark horse teams, sometimes I might have just jinxed them and say that they might actually not make the playoffs, even though I call them a dark horse team, or the fact that I call them a dark horse team and they actually act like a dark horse team to be going up in the table. Anyway, I don't know if you actually know what am I saying, so that's why we're moving on into 5th place. And in 5th, it's going to be the Philadelphia Union. So I think the Union this year could be a little bit of a setback from last season, because last season they really kind of surprised a lot of people with the way that they becoming a very entertaining team to watch, and there were definitely a couple of players in that team last season that was really overperforming. We don't know whether or not if they can do it for the 2nd year in a row, and they also lost some key pieces in this team too, and probably the biggest piece is Harris Medunian, their leading assist player, that is no longer with this team and joined FC Cincinnati. But at least the good thing about this team is that they still have El Zeno on this team, and El Zeno, if he can do what he did last season, which was just being an absolute pest when he come off the bench, and that if there was an award in terms of who is the best super sub in the league, there's no doubt that El Zeno was going to be that player. But if he can do it again heading into this season, I think this team could potentially finish in the top part of the table. But just something tells me that this team could have a little bit of a setback, and that some of the players that was really kind of overperforming last season might start to come back down to earth, and that some of the pieces that they lost this offseason, they tried to kind of replace them, but we'll see whether or not if those replacement is going to be decent or not. Now, at number 4, I'm going to say it's going to be DC United. And I actually had DC as high as 2nd place, but the reason why I dropped them down a little bit has a lot to do with the Paul Arriola injury. I mean, Paul Arriola, it's such a disappointment, not just for DC, but also the fact that he, of course, suffered a torn ACL and probably won't be back until the latter part of the season. And for a guy that is one of the most hard-working player in this league and one of the most hard-working player for DC United, they're going to really miss that present that he has. Now, the good news is they do have some good replacement for him, and I'm guessing most likely replacing Paul Arriola in that spot has to be Julian Gresso, even though I know Julian Gresso, when he was at Atlanta, he played in the fullback role for a lot, but keep in mind, he's a very versatile player, probably the best versatile player in the league, and that he also have openly said that when he joined DC, he does not want to play that fullback role. So this is a good chance for Ben Olsen to potentially put him in the wing area where he tends to like, and maybe DC could be a very decent team, and that they could maybe finish in the top 3 spot in the Eastern Conference. But the reason why I started to put them a little bit low is the fact that, you know, the Paul Arriola injury is definitely hurts them, and, you know, I also kind of have questions in terms of the striker position that they had, and that, you know, yes, it's good that they have Ola Kamara, who is a lethal striker, and I think he's going to be having a field day with this team, and probably having a season just as great as when he was with Columbus and the Galaxy, because he has some of the best attacking midfielder and some of the best playmaker on that team that will feed the ball to him to score goals. However, he's the only strikers on that team. They are very thin in terms of that striker position, and if he goes down, then there's going to be a lot of question to ask who exactly is going to be that striker, and if they are going to play somebody that is going to be in that striker, most likely he's not going to be in a natural position, and most likely maybe DC won't even play a striker and just play a false 9 heading into those games if Ola Kamara isn't available for them. Now, in third place, I'm going to say it's going to be Atlanta. So, Atlanta, I think they, of course, are going to drop 1 spot again from last season. I mean, last season they dropped 1 spot from where they finished, which was at the top of the Eastern Conference. Or, actually, no, that's not correct. I literally forgot that the Red Bulls actually finished first in the Eastern Conference, and they won the Supporter Shield back in 2018, but Atlanta, of course, won MLS Cup in 2018 also. And then the following year, it was NYCFC that finished first, and Atlanta was in second place, and it wasn't even close in terms of them being in second place. Now, this year, I'm going to put them down a place lower because, you know, they are kind of in a little bit of a transitional period heading into this season, and that I feel like, you know, with all the changes that they made doing this offseason, my main concern is that that's going to really upset the balance of the team, and that also really puts some pressure in terms of some of these players like Ezekiel Barco and Pity Martinez to really step up in this team to kind of carry the team that was once occupied by spots like Julian Gresso and Tito Villalba, who is no longer with this team. But that being said, you know, the reason why I still put them very high is because this is Atlanta, and I have a feeling Atlanta is it would be crazy to put Atlanta anywhere even below the top 3 spot. I mean, if I put Atlanta in below the top 3 spot, Atlanta fans are gonna absolutely hate me for that. But, you know, as long as they, you know, this team, I still think they have a very decent squad, even though they lost a couple of key pieces. I mean, they did try to replace some of them during this offseason. And let's also not forget, they still have the goal-scoring king, Joseph Martinez. Like, I don't care if this team is kind of like in transition or whatsoever. Anytime if you have Joseph Martinez in your team, you know you're going to at least finish top 4. Like, he is going to be that goal scorer that we, of course, would always know. And, you know, I think maybe this season there might be questions. Some people might say, well, now the fact that he's probably not going to get the same service that he did like last season, and even in the previous season, and that if they don't really have like a playmaker on that team to give him service, he's not as useful as it is. Well, this is also where I talk about how Pity Martinez is one of those guys that I think this season he has a lot to prove, that he can play in that number 10 spot, and he can really just reward Atlanta after all the transfer fee to pay him and get him from last season, and that if he has an amazing year, then I think Atlanta is going to be once again finished near the top of the Eastern Conference. Now, at number 2 and finishing second in the Eastern Conference, I'm going to say Toronto FC. So, Toronto FC, it's clear that this team is one of the team that is going to be competing for MLS Cup, and I have a feeling that just like what I said about Seattle and the fact that whether or not if they're going to have a cup hangover, which I kind of say no, because Seattle, they've been into cup final before, and the very next year they of course go back to the same game that they were in last season, and that's the same with TFC. I don't think this team is going to get any hangover from being in MLS Cup final last year. I think this team looks pretty good going forward, and I think maybe the only question that I do have with this TFC team might be in the midfield position, where Bradley of course went down with an injury in that MLS Cup final, and that he's not going to be available for the first couple of months because of that, and he had to undergo surgery. It's going to be interesting to see who, of course, would be in his spot. And, going forward on the attack, if they have Pozuelo and Altidore both on the pitch, I think this team could be easily one of the most lethal attacking team in pretty much every single team in the Eastern Conference and in the league. But the question is, if one of them does go down, then that could also kind of put a big question mark of whether or not if they are going to be as lethal as going forward on the attack. But still, at the end of the day, I feel like TFC, knowing last season when they did this quick rebuild and having all that momentum heading into the playoffs, I think they're going to have that momentum is going to carry into this season, and that really, I think with the squad that they have, and knowing that some of their core pieces is started to age a little bit, they know that they are really going all out and trying to win a second MLS Cup. And what piece that they bought in this offseason, which was Pablo Piatti, the 30-year-old winger from Espanyol. It's clear that the reason why they bought him isn't because he's going to be here for a couple of years, but they bought him because they feel like if they add in another key piece on the attack and add another key DP slot in there, that this team could compete for MLS Cup. And I agree. I think this team is going to be a very dangerous team and could easily be a team that's going to be finished near the top of the Eastern Conference standings. Which brings us to first place, and that, of course, is NYCFC, which, by the way, how about NYCFC tonight in the CONCACAF Champions League? Like, they probably played the most exciting CCL game that we have seen so far in the first leg of the first round of the CONCACAF Champions League, where they basically scored 5 goals in that game. And despite the fact that they did concede 3 goals, and that I think a lot of NYCFC fans, despite the fact that they saw an incredible game and they're happy that the fact that the team was able to go on the road and score 5 goals and win it 5-3, they might be a little bit concerned about the defense that was, let's just say it was very suspect tonight. But I'll give them the pass, and I really kind of want to give pass to all these teams that's playing in CCL right now, where I really feel like if some of these teams are not doing well in CCL, I'm just going to kind of give them the pass, the fact that, they're playing their first competitive game in a couple of months, and that they're probably not really up to speed. And we've seen some of these best team in the league, even with Atlanta, they were very short going into their CCL match, and that they were really short at the back, but they still able to pull out a 1-1 draw down in I think, was it they were playing a team in El Salvador, but it was pretty impressive that they were able to do that despite the shortest of the squad. So that's why I'm not going to judge these teams that's playing in CCL that might not be doing very well so far. I'm looking at you, LAFC, when you play against Lyon. I'm not going to judge the fact that they're going to be like that heading into the season. And once these team gets back into league form and gets back into regular season form, I think these teams are going to be very lethal. And that is going to be the case with NYCFC, where I think of all the teams that are playing in CCL, I feel like tonight they look the most impressive. And that's no offense to Montreal in that game against Saprissa, where I thought they also look very impressive. And also, did I say earlier the fact that they were probably the most impressive team? Yeah, sorry, Montreal. I kind of lied in terms of that. I have to give NYCFC the title because, they looked like they were in regular season form with them banging the goals tonight. And that, again, the only issue that I think after tonight that they had coming out of that CCL game is that defense looked very, very poor last season. Or looked very, very poor in that game. But it's okay. Maybe that defense is in a preseason form, and as long as you're scoring goals and your attack is in regular season form, this team could be maybe a dangerous threat going forward into the CONCACAF Champions League. But going back to the regular season, yeah, there's no doubt that I think if you look at this team, they probably have not only the best squad in the Eastern Conference, but probably one of the most well-rounded squad in the Eastern Conference too, where they're pretty much too deep in every single position, and they have quality from top to bottom. And I won't be surprised if they're going to finish first again this season, and that they might even challenge for Supporter Shield. But as any NYCFC fans, and they probably will tell you that they don't really care the fact that if they finish first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or the fact that they are able to finish right above the red line. What they really care is that this team needs to compete for MLS Cup, and that it's getting to a point where years and years of playoff failure is started to really frustrate the fan base of NYCFC, and that they really hope that this is finally going to be the year that they can put an end to these failures that they have in the playoffs, and that even if they need to sacrifice in the regular season and maybe not play as well in the regular season to get ready and get better prepared in the postseason, I think they'll do exactly that. But that being said, again, when you look at this well-rounded squad, and even if they have a new manager in place in Ronnie Delia, who there's still a couple of people that kind of question whether or not if he can do what Dominic Turan did to this NYCFC squad for the past couple of years. I think he could, and I think knowing the fact that he's coming from another team that has a very well-rounded squad in Celtic and got them to winning titles, I think he's going to not only go into this team and kind of had that same profile where he's going to get a lot of talented player in this team, but the fact that I think this team should be able to finish first and should be able to be a team that hopefully they'll be in a good shape heading into the playoffs and finally end the misery and pain of them exiting in the second round of the playoffs throughout their first couple of years in MLS. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the prediction of the Eastern Conference. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these prediction? And as I said before, if you feel like some of your teams that I put are not in the playoffs that feels like they should belong into the playoffs, let me know in the comments below. If I put your team a little bit too low in the ranking and you disagree, also let me know in the comments below, why do you think of that. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.